we are seeing the power of motivation, how a spark can ignite powerful consequences. This spark need not always be one of association. There's an almost endless array of motivational triggers that can suddenly cause us to care deeply, as we saw in the opening section of this chapter with the likes of Shaquille O'Neal and Carly Simon. But on the other hand, we are seeing once again that the attainment of excellence is a long-term process. Ignition does not provide a shortcut. Rather, it is the spark that starts one out on the long and arduous path to excellence. All of which raises a further question. Many have been sparked by a particular event, associational or otherwise, and set off on a path toward a new destination with a fresh, often subconscious, sense of drive and purpose. But this on its own is insufficient to attain excellence. We have all met individuals who started out with gusto, only to fizzle away when encountering challenges and difficulties. Why were some of the Korean girls inspired by Park still striving for improvement 5 years later, while others were not? Why were some of the Yale students energized by a shared birth date, still straining to solve the puzzle after most of the others had given up? Remember, 65% represented the average increase in persistence. Why is it that some people are open to the long-term consequences of ignition, while others seem to drift back into a state of motivational passivity? To understand this, we have to explore the deeper question of how motivation is sustained. What psychological mechanisms are in operation, and how do such things as belief, confidence, and emotion influence them? Having widened the focus to look at the contours of motivational ignition, we have to narrow it again to delve into the individual mind. We do so using the groundbreaking research of Carol Dweck, a professor at Stanford University and one of the most influential psychologists of modern times. The talent myth revisited. The talent myth, as we have seen, is built on the idea that innate ability rather than practice is what ultimately determines whether we have it within us to achieve excellence. We've also seen that this is a rather corrosive idea, robbing individuals of the incentive to transform themselves through effort. Why spend time and energy seeking to improve if success is available only to people with the right genes? In 1978, Dweck asked the question, just how corrosive is it? Does a belief in the primacy of talent operate on the edges of our behavior, or does it define the way we interpret and respond to challenges? Does it sit in the background, only functioning at an intellectual level, or does it seep into everything we think, feel, and do? And do our beliefs about talent determine whether we persist on the road to excellence, rather than fizzle out? Dweck's experiment was simplicity itself. Along with a fellow researcher, she took 330 5th and 6th graders and gave them a questionnaire to probe their beliefs about talent, and, in particular, intelligence. Those students who held the belief that intelligence is set in genetic stone, i.e. those who subscribed to the talent myth, had what Dweck would later call a fixed mindset. Those who believed that intelligence can be transformed through effort had a growth mindset. The students were then given a series of problems, the first 8 of which were pretty easy. The next 4, formidably difficult. As the children toiled, 2 dramatically different patterns emerged. Here is Dweck describing the kids in the fixed mindset group, those who subscribed to the talent myth, when they came up against the tough puzzles. Maybe the most striking thing about this group was how quickly they began to denigrate their abilities and blame their intelligence for the failures, saying things like, "I guess I'm not very smart. I never did have a good memory," and "I'm no good at things like this." What was so striking about this was that only moments before, these students had had an unbroken string of successes. Their intelligence and their memory were working just fine. What's more, during these successes, their performance was every bit as good as that of the mastery-oriented, growth mindset group. Still, only a short while after the difficult problems began, they lost faith in their intellect. 2/3 of them showed a clear deterioration in their strategies, and more than half of them lapsed into completely ineffective strategies. In short, the majority of students in this group abandoned or became incapable of deploying the effective strategies in their repertoire. And the kids with the growth mindset? Here is Dweck again. We saw that the students in the helpless, fixed mindset group blamed their intelligence when they hit failure. What did the students in the mastery-oriented, growth mindset group blame? The answer, which surprised us, was that they did not blame anything. They didn't focus on reasons for the failures. In fact, they didn't even seem to consider themselves to be failing. How did they perform? In line with their optimism, most of the students in this group, more than 80%, maintained or improved the quality of their strategies during the difficult problems. A full quarter of the group actually improved. They taught themselves new and more sophisticated strategies for addressing the new and more difficult problems. A few of them even solved the problems that were supposedly beyond them. Thus, even though they were no better than the helpless children on the original success problems, they ended up showing a much higher level of performance. This is not just dramatic, it's extraordinary. Just to reiterate, this gaping schism in performance had nothing to do with intelligence and nothing to do with motivation. Indeed, Dweck actually made sure that all the students were equally motivated by offering gifts they had personally selected. Instead, the gap in performance was opened up by something completely different: their respective beliefs or mindsets. Those who held the belief that abilities are transformable through effort not only persevered, but actually improved in the teeth of difficulties. Those laboring under the talent myth, on the other hand, regressed into a state of psychological enfeeblement. Why such a striking difference? Consider for a moment what was going on in the minds of the two groups of students. Both groups understood that the test was measuring their intelligence. So far so good. But those in the fixed mindset had a further belief, that the test was also measuring how intelligent they would be in the future. How do we know this? Because by definition, they believe that intelligence is fixed by innate talent. So the test is not merely a snapshot of an evolving capacity, but a measure that represents basic intelligence now and forever. Is it any wonder that they interpret failure as calamitous? That it saps their creativity and undermines future performance? That they will do anything to avoid challenges, even when challenges might be useful? Perhaps the most stunning example of the destructive tendencies of the fixed mindset was demonstrated by a study of freshmen at the University of Hong Kong in 1999. All classes at the university are conducted in English, but not all students arrive at the university with equal language skills. So Dweck and her fellow researchers identified a group of students with poor English and then gave them a questionnaire to sort them into fixed and growth mindset groupings. The students were then asked whether they would be interested in taking a remedial language class. This was a no-brainer, the kind of offer no sensible person could refuse, a chance to get a boost in one of the most important skills required by the university. But those with a fixed mindset refused point blank. They were no more interested in the class than students who spoke perfect English and who had, therefore, nothing to learn. The fixed mindset students were imperiling their chances at university simply to insulate themselves from the possibility of failure. Those with the growth mindset, on the other hand, registered a high interest in taking the class, just as you'd expect. As Dweck puts it, in the growth mindset, you don't feel the need to convince yourself and others that you have a royal flush when you're secretly worried it's a pair of tens. The hand you're dealt is just the starting point. Although people may differ in every which way, in their initial talents and aptitudes, interests or temperaments, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. Take a look at that last paragraph again, because it may look familiar. The reason is that it is almost a perfect summary of everything we have learned about expertise so far in this book. The words could almost have been taken from the mouth of Anders Ericsson. What this is telling us is that individuals with the growth mindset have a belief about the nature of talent that is actually corroborated by the evidence. Now hold that thought and consider this one instead. Remember Shizuka Arakawa, who fell down more than 20,000 times on her odyssey from wannabe schoolgirl to Olympic figure skating champion? When examining her story, the one question we failed to ask was, why? Why would anyone endure all that? Why would she keep striving in the teeth of constant failure? Why not give up and try something else? Dweck's research hands us the answer. It is because she did not interpret falling down as failure. Armed with a growth mindset, she interpreted falling down not merely as a means of improving, but as evidence that she was improving. Failure was not something that sapped her energy and vitality, but something that provided her with an opportunity to learn, develop, and adapt. This may seem odd, but it is central to the belief system of most top performers. Remember that famous Nike commercial where Michael Jordan says, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and missed." Many were bemused by the message, but to Jordan, a living, breathing testament to the growth mindset, it expressed a deep and urgent truth. In order to become the greatest basketball player of all time, you have to embrace failure. Mental toughness and heart are a lot stronger than some of the physical advantages you might have, he said. I've always said that, and I've always believed that. Thomas Edison, the great American inventor, made precisely the same point. If I find 10,000 ways something won't work, I haven't failed. I'm not discouraged, because every wrong attempt discarded is another step forward. Footnote. Samuel Beckett, the playwright, also expresses this truth in his novella, Worsted Hoe. Ever tried, ever failed. No matter. Try again. Fail better. End footnote. Think of life as having two paths, one leading to mediocrity, the other to excellence. What do we know about the path to mediocrity? Well, we know it is flat and straight. We know that it is possible to cruise along on autopilot with a nice, smooth, steady, almost effortless progression. We know, above all, that you can reach the destination without stumbling and falling over. If you travel along this kind of path, it scarcely matters which mindset you have. Both the fixed and growth mindset groups will happily proceed toward their destination without any problems. Neither group will forge ahead. Neither group will lag behind. They will both arrive at mediocrity with time to spare. But the path to excellence could not be more different. It is steep, grueling, and arduous. It is inordinately lengthy, requiring a minimum of 10,000 hours of lung-busting effort to get to the summit. And most important of all, it forces voyagers to stumble and fall on every single stretch of the journey. How do we know that? Because this is the defining feature of purposeful practice, without which excellence is unattainable. Excellence is about striving for what is just out of reach and not quite making it. It is about grappling with tasks beyond current limitations and falling short again and again. The paradox of excellence is that it is built upon the foundations of necessary failure. The implication hardly needs spelling out. A growth mindset is perfectly suited to the achievement of excellence. A fixed mindset to the achievement of mediocrity. Even if the sparks that ignite us are sometimes enigmatic, lost in the deep and unfathomable mysteries of the mind, one thing is certain. If your chosen destination is within the domain of excellence, you'd better have a growth mindset. Why? Because a spark ignited in a fixed mind is likely to be extinguished at the first sign of failure. But is it possible to take control of your mindset and those of your children or pupils? Is it possible to ditch the talent myth once you have fallen under its spell? The power of words. In 1998, Carol Dweck and a colleague took 400 fifth graders and gave them a series of simple puzzles. Afterward, each of the students was given his or her score, plus something else. 6 words of praise. Half the students were praised for intelligence. You must be smart at this. The other half were praised for effort. You must have worked really hard. Dweck was seeking to test whether these simple words, with their subtly different emphases, could make a difference to the students' mindsets, whether they could mold the students' attitude to success and failure, whether they could have a measurable impact on persistence and performance. The results were remarkable. After the first test, the students were given a choice of whether to take a hard or an easy test. A full 2/3 of the students, praised for intelligence, chose the easy task. They did not want to risk losing their smart label by potentially failing at the harder test. But 90% of the effort-praised group chose the tough test. They were not interested in success, but in exploring a potentially fruitful challenge. They wanted to prove just how hard-working they were. Next, the students were given a test so tough that none of them succeeded. But once again, there was a dramatic difference between the ways they responded to failure. Those praised for intelligence interpreted their failures as proof that they were no good at puzzles after all. The group praised for effort persevered on the test far longer, enjoyed it far more, and did not suffer any loss in confidence. Finally, the experiment came full circle, giving the students a chance to do a test of equal difficulty to the very first test. What happened? The group praised for intelligence showed a 20% decline in performance compared with the first test, even though it was no harder. But those in the effort-praised group increased their scores by 30%. Failure had actually spurred them on. And all of these differences turned on the difference in 6 simple words spoken after the very first test. Dweck and her fellow researcher were so stunned by these results that they repeated the experiment 3 times with students in different parts of the country and with very different ethnic backgrounds. On all 3 occasions, the results were identical. These were some of the clearest findings I've ever seen, Dweck said. Praising children's intelligence harms their motivation, and it harms their performance. The reason is not difficult to find. Intelligence-based praise orients its receivers toward the fixed mindset. It suggests to them that intelligence is of primary importance, rather than the effort through which intelligence can be transformed. And it teaches them to pursue easy challenges at the expense of real learning. Mindsets frame the running account that's taking place in people's head, Dweck has written. They guide the whole interpretation process. Take a look at the following expressions of talent-oriented praise. You learn that so quickly. You're so smart. Look at that drawing. Martha, is he the next Picasso or what? You're so brilliant. You got an A without even studying. They all sound wonderfully supportive and come across as precisely the kind of confidence-boosting statements that should be given to students, or indeed anyone else. But now listen to the subliminal messages lurking in the background. If I don't learn something quickly, I'm not smart. I shouldn't try drawing anything hard, or they'll see I'm no Picasso. I'd better quit studying, or they won't think I'm brilliant. These examples, taken from Dweck's book Mindset, hint at a radical new approach to the way we interact with students, aspiring sports stars, or indeed anyone else. That we should praise effort, not talent. That we should emphasize how abilities can be transformed through application. That we should teach others and ourselves to see challenges as learning opportunities rather than threats. That we should interpret failure not as an indictment, but as an opportunity. How, then, to praise a student who has just performed a task easily and quickly? How to avoid praising talent rather than effort when she has just accomplished something without breaking a sweat? Here's Dweck's advice. When this happens, I say, whoops, I guess that was too easy. I apologize for wasting your time. Let's do something you can really learn from. The implications of Dweck's research are profound. Many educators have argued that lowering standards will boost the self-esteem of students and ultimately improve attainment. This was indeed the philosophy of the educational establishment in the United States and across Europe for much of the 1970s and 1980s, and it continues to exert a lingering influence. But we can now see that, however well-intentioned, it is corrosive as an educational creed. It comes from the same philosophy as the overpraising of students' intelligence. Dweck has written, well, it doesn't work. Lowering standards just leads to poorly educated students who feel entitled to easy work and lavish praise. Citadels of Excellence.